Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Geographer. I am so glad you found your way here tonight. Tonight we are going to explore how mountains form. From the floor of a warm, ancient ocean, through the deep dark where rock bends and folds under unimaginable pressure, all the way up to the highest peaks on Earth. A journey through one of the longest and most patient processes this planet has ever performed. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to join us for more peaceful journeys. And leave a thought in the comments about where you are in the world tonight and what time it is for you. It is always quietly wonderful to know who is drifting off with us from so many different corners of the earth. Now let your body settle into wherever you are. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day begin to drift a little further away. Let's begin. Close your eyes if you would like, and imagine something for me. You are standing at the bottom of an ancient ocean, 250 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, before mammals, before birds, before almost anything you would recognize as life today. The world above the water is strange and empty and silent by our standards. But down here, beneath the surface of a warm tropical sea, something is happening that will not show any results for an almost incomprehensible length of time. Take a moment to feel where you are. The water above you is warm near the surface, where the sun reaches. But down here, at the bottom, it is cool and still and dark. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off, the darkness of depth, of hundreds of meters of water above you absorbing every last particle of light before it can reach this far down. It is a soft darkness, a patient darkness, the kind of darkness that has simply always been here and expects to remain. There is no current at this depth. The water is perfectly still. If you held out your hand, you would feel almost nothing, just the faintest pressure. The weight of the ocean above you, distributed so evenly across your body that it feels less like pressure and more like being held, like being wrapped in something very old and very quiet. The temperature is steady. It has been this temperature for thousands of years, and it will be this temperature for thousands more. Nothing changes quickly down here. Nothing changes at all, in any way you could notice. And yet, something is arriving from far above, from the bright, warm surface world where the sunlight reaches and tiny creatures live their brief lives and die in their billions every day. Something is falling, slowly, so slowly. A single shell, smaller than a grain of sand, has just begun its journey from the surface of this ancient sea toward the floor. It left the surface perhaps 3 hours ago. It is drifting downward through the water column, spiraling almost imperceptibly in a current so faint it barely deserves the name. It passes through the bright zone near the surface, where the light is green and warm. It passes through the zone where the light fades from green to blue. It passes through the zone where the blue grows dimmer. It passes through the near dark. And now, here, it enters the absolute dark. Still falling, still unhurried, in no rush to arrive anywhere. Hold that image for a moment. A shell the size of a dust grain falling through dark water, taking 3 hours to complete a journey of 500 meters. Not hurrying, not knowing it is falling at all, simply moving the way all things move in response to what surrounds them. The water is there, gravity is there, the floor is below, and so it falls. Somewhere above this ancient ocean, the surface catches the last of a dying day. Light breaking into gold across water that stretches in every direction without a single shore in sight. And then the surface dims. And then it darkens. And the ocean continues its work in the dark, as it always has, as it always will, the tiny shell still falling, still turning, still making its way down through the cold. Allow your own thoughts to begin drifting like that now, not down into anything frightening, just down into the quiet that is always underneath everything, waiting beneath the surface noise of the day, beneath the lists and the memories and the things left undone. There is stillness below all of it if you sink far enough to find it. The shell arrives. There is no sound when it lands, no disturbance. It simply comes to rest among millions of others just like it, on a floor that has been receiving them for longer than you can hold in your mind. And then another arrives, and another after that, grain by grain, shell by shell, layer by layer. This almost invisible accumulation in the dark is where mountains begin, not explosions, not collisions, not anything sudden or dramatic or loud, just a tiny shell drifting down through cold water and coming to rest on an ancient floor, joined, without ceremony, by another, and another, until the pile is a metre deep, then 10 meters, then 100, then 1,000, until what was soft sediment becomes stone, until what was stone is folded and lifted, until what was lifted is a mountain. Imagine those mountains in your mind's eye for a moment, not as they are forming, not yet, but as they will eventually stand. White peaks touching a sky so blue it almost hurts. Ridgelines running in long silver curves against the dark. Snow catching moonlight on a still night, glowing faintly like something lit from within. Glaciers filling the valleys between them, ancient and quiet and blue. That is where all of this is going. But right now, there is only the dark, and the floor, and the falling. The word for what is arriving here is sediment. Sediment. Say it slowly inside your mind if you like. Sediment. It is a soft word, a slow word. It sounds like what it is. Small things coming to rest. The world depositing itself quietly onto whatever lies below. Grains of sand, fragments of rock, the crushed shells of creatures that lived briefly and then sank. Volcanic ash from distant eruptions on continents so far away they cannot be imagined from here. Specks of dust that fell from the air into the ocean and kept falling, all the way down here, all the way to this quiet floor. Each grain is almost nothing. A single grain of sand settling onto the ocean floor would be invisible, meaningless. It would make no sound, leave no mark you could point to. It would simply arrive and rest. And it would be joined by another, and another, and another after that. The ocean floor does not notice each grain arriving. It simply receives. It does not measure how much has accumulated or worry about whether it is enough. It does not compare itself to other ocean floors or wonder what it is becoming. It simply is what it is, right now, in this moment, receiving whatever the ocean sends down. Far above, on the surface of this ancient sea, the night has fully settled in. Stars are reflected in black water, each one trembling slightly with the motion of small waves. There are no human eyes to see them, no boats, no shores. Just open ocean under an ancient sky, and below it, the dark, and below that, the floor, still receiving, still building, one grain at a time. The shells are still falling. They were falling long before you arrived here, and they will be falling long after this moment has passed. The water holds its stillness. The darkness asks nothing of the night. Everything here has been doing what it does for millions of years without needing to be anywhere else. What is falling here is not only shells. Rivers flow from distant continents into this ancient ocean, and rivers carry things. Sand and silt and clay, picked up from the land over which they have travelled. When a river meets the sea and slows, it lets go of what it was carrying. The heaviest things fall first, close to the shore. The lightest things drift furthest out before finally settling. So the floor receives a little of everything. Sand from a beach that no longer exists. Clay from a floodplain that dried up 30 million years ago. the faintest trace of volcanic ash from an eruption on a continent you would not recognize, carried across the world by winds that have since changed direction. Each layer that builds up here is a quiet record of something that happened somewhere in the world. A dark layer might be a time of great volcanic activity, ash settling through the water for centuries like grey snow. A pale layer might be a time when the ocean above was warm and rich and full of life, producing more shells than usual, more tiny deaths, more slow falling. A reddish layer might record a change in the ocean's chemistry, some ancient shift in the balance of things that lasted for 10,000 years and then quietly passed. If you could hold a slice of this sediment in your hands and read it, each layer would be a page. The longest book ever written, a book that no one composed, that simply accumulated, word by word, grain by grain, in the dark. But right now the layers are flat, perfectly horizontal, laid down one on top of the other exactly as they fell in the order they arrived, undisturbed, unfolded, still waiting for the force that will eventually tilt and twist and push them upward into something neither they nor anyone could have predicted. Above this ocean, if there were eyes to see it, clouds are moving across the face of the night. Great slow banks of them, crossing the stars one by one. The ocean surface lifts and falls in long, gentle swells. A wind is blowing from the south, warm and salt-smelling, ruffling the surface into small, bright peaks that catch what little light exists and release it again. And none of this, not the wind, not the clouds, not the stars, reaches the floor. Down here there is only the endless dark and the falling and the receiving. The layers build in the dark, each one resting on the one before it, each one becoming, over time, the foundation of what comes next. The floor receives without choosing. It simply is where it is, and the ocean sends what it sends, and the record grows deeper. Something is happening beneath the seafloor that cannot be seen. Deep below the floor of this ancient ocean, far deeper than the sediment, far deeper than the rock that lies beneath the sediment, something is moving. The earth is not solid all the way through. Imagine, for a moment, the planet you are lying on right now. You are resting on the outermost layer, the crust, the thin, cool, broken skin of the earth. Beneath you, it extends downward through the dark before it gives way to something different. That distance sounds like a great deal, but the earth stretches all the way to a core of unimaginable heat at its center. The crust is thinner, relative to the whole, than the skin of an apple is to the apple. Below the crust is the mantle. The mantle is rock, but not rock the way the ground beneath your building is rock. Rock under such immense heat and pressure that it flows. Not quickly. Not in any way you could observe in a human lifetime or 1,000 human lifetimes. But it flows. The way cold honey flows. The way glass, given enough centuries, will very slowly sag. It circulates so gradually that a single movement might take 1,000,000 years to complete. Hot rock rising from the deep interior, cool rock near the surface sinking back down. A circulation so immense that the human mind cannot quite hold it. And it is this flowing of rock, deep beneath you, that drives everything that happens at the surface, including the movement of continents, including the building of mountains. The ground beneath you is being moved by rock flowing deep below so gradually that nothing alive will ever notice it happening. And yet it has been happening for 4 billion years. And it will keep happening long after everything alive today has returned to the cycle from which it came. The rock flows, the plates move, the heat rises from the deep interior, and the cooler rock near the surface sinks back down. It has been doing this since long before anything lived on the surface above. It requires nothing. It simply continues. On the surface of this ancient world, somewhere far from this ocean, there are plains. Great flat expanses under open sky, crossed by the shadows of clouds. There are rivers cutting through red rock. There are coastlines where warm waves break endlessly against pale stone. None of it looks like anything you would recognize. The shapes of things are wrong. The colors are different. The air itself carries a different mixture. And yet here, in the dark below the sea, grain by grain, the slow invisible work is already underway that will one day produce something you could stand on and name. The crust that lies beneath this ocean is not one piece. It never was. It is broken, fractured into great slabs that fit together like pieces of a very slow puzzle, each one drifting on the flowing rock of the mantle below. Some of these slabs carry continents on their backs. Others form the floors of oceans. They have been drifting for as long as the Earth has had a crust, and they are drifting right now. These are called tectonic plates, and they are moving tonight. Right now, as you lie here, the ground beneath you is in motion. You cannot feel it. No instrument in this room could measure it, but it is happening. The plates move at roughly the speed your fingernails grow. Think about that for a moment. Think about how slowly your fingernails grow. You do not notice them growing. You only know they have grown because eventually, after days and weeks, you look down and see that they are longer. That is the speed at which the continents drift. In your entire lifetime, the ground you stand on will have moved perhaps 1.5 meters from where it was the day you were born. That is not very far, but slow things do not need to be fast. They only need to be consistent. And the Earth has been consistent for 4.5 billion years. The motion is so small that no instrument in any room has ever detected it in a single moment. It only reveals itself across stretches of time so large they have no equivalent in any human experience. A coastline that was once joined to another coastline on the far side of an ocean. A mountain range that began as the floor of a warm, shallow sea. The evidence is everywhere, written in the rock, readable only by those who know how to look for it and are willing to think in units of time that dwarf everything alive. Somewhere far above, on the surface of this ancient world, a wind is moving across an empty plain. It picks up grains of red dust and carries them in a long, low cloud above the ground, depositing some, lifting others, rearranging the surface of the earth in its own small way. The wind does not know it is doing this. It simply moves, as everything moves, in response to what surrounds it. Heat and cold, high pressure and low, the spin of the planet beneath it. And in this way, without plan or purpose, the world reshapes itself. The wind moves across the plain without knowing it is moving. The dust rises and falls. The surface of the ancient world shifts grain by grain under an empty sky. Two of these great plates concern our story tonight. On one side of this ancient ocean, a vast continent is beginning a journey northward. A landmass that will one day become the country of India, though right now it looks nothing like it and is attached to a much larger southern landmass that geologists call Gondwana. It has been moving for a long time. It will keep moving for a long time more. On the other side of the ocean, the edge of what will eventually become Asia. Between them, our warm ancient sea, full of its falling shells, full of its patient dark, not knowing, in the way oceans do not know things, that it is being approached from both sides, that its days, measured in millions of years, are numbered. The distance between them is vast. Think of the distance from where you are lying right now to the furthest place you have ever been. Now multiply that distance by 100. The ocean between these two approaching landmasses is wider than any ocean that exists today. It will take a very long time to close. But it is closing. Each year a little closer. Each quiet season a little less between them. The ocean does not know this. The creatures living in it do not know this. The shells falling through its dark water do not know this. They simply do what they do, as they have always done, as everything alive has always done, without any knowledge of the larger story they are part of. Picture this ocean from very far above, so far that the curvature of the earth is visible, a long blue arc against the black of space. The ocean fills the frame. It is enormous. Its surface catches sunlight and holds it in long rippling paths from horizon to horizon. And at its edges, So far apart, they barely seem to be part of the same picture, two great masses of land. Both dark, both still, both moving, invisibly, imperceptibly, toward each other. That is what millions of years looks like from far enough away. Two continents moving toward each other across an ocean so wide you could cross it without ever suspecting it had an end. Both of them closing a distance that would take a human mind a very long time to hold. The shells are still falling. The floor of this ancient sea receives everything the ocean sends down, building in the dark the foundations of what will one day stand in sunlight and hold snow and cast shadows across whole valleys. One more shell has just come to rest, joining the layer beneath it without a sound. The seafloor has been building for a very long time. Stay here for a moment before we follow the story forward. In a single human lifetime, the accumulation would be invisible to the naked eye. In 1,000 lifetimes, still almost nothing you could point to. And yet, given the kind of time the Earth works in, the deep, unhurried time that has no equivalent in any human experience, the pile grows vast. What was almost nothing becomes hundreds of meters, then deeper still. The weight of it compressing everything below into stone. But you would not have seen it growing. Not in a day, not in a year, not in a century. If you had stood on this ocean floor for 1,000 years and watched, you would have seen nothing change. The sediment falls too quietly for any single moment to contain evidence of it. The floor looks the same at the end of those 1,000 years as it did at the beginning. And yet, it is not the same. It is thousands of layers deeper, thousands of moments richer, thousands of tiny arrivals heavier. The change is real. It is just invisible from inside any single moment. Somewhere far above this ocean, on the surface of the world, the night sky is immense and clear. Stars extend from horizon to horizon without interruption. The Milky Way is a great soft river of light crossing the dark from east to west. There are no lights below it, no cities, no fires, just the open ocean and the sky above it, and between them a silence so complete that the only sound is the movement of water against itself. And below the surface, the dark is deeper still. And below the dark, the floor is still receiving. The ocean floor has no knowledge of what it is becoming. It simply receives what arrives and holds it. Layer after layer after layer, each one the record of a moment that passed without witness. A thought drifts through. It arrives like a shell arriving at the floor, without sound, without disturbance. And it settles somewhere deep and becomes part of the layer and is covered by the next one and then the one after that. Nothing to hold on to, nothing to carry forward, just the floor receiving. One more thing about this ancient ocean floor before we follow the story of what happens to it. The rock it is becoming is not all the same. What falls and accumulates here is a mixture. Near the edges of the ocean, close to where rivers enter from the surrounding continents, coarser sand and silt settle. The grains are larger. The rock they become is sandstone, pale and gritty, with the ghost of each individual grain still visible if you look closely enough. Further out, in the deeper and quieter water, the finest particles settle. The clay that was carried furthest from any shore. The rock it becomes is mudstone, smooth, dark grey, so fine-grained that no individual particle is visible to the naked eye. And everywhere, in all the depths, the shells of tiny creatures are falling. The rock they become is limestone, pale, sometimes almost white, made almost entirely of calcium carbonate, the same mineral that makes your bones hard, extracted from the seawater by creatures too small to see with the naked eye, built into shells, and then, when the creature dies, surrendered back to the ocean in the slow fall we have been watching. Limestone is a quiet rock. It does not sparkle the way some rocks sparkle. It does not have the dramatic banding of rocks that have been through great heat and pressure. It is pale and fine and still. It holds fossils better than almost any other rock because it forms in quiet water without the violence that destroys delicate things. One day, millions of years from now, that limestone will be lifted high into cold mountain air. It will be exposed on cliff faces above cloud level. Climbers will pass their hands across it without knowing what they are touching. Wind will carve it. Ice will fracture it. Snow will settle into its cracks and melt in spring and run in cold, clear streams down the flanks of peaks so high that the air above them is thin and blue and silent. But for now, it is still forming, still soft, still building, still accumulating in the deep. If you ever pick up a piece of pale limestone and look at it closely, you may see the faint outlines of shells, coiled shapes, disc shapes. The ghosts of creatures that lived briefly in an ancient sea and left this one quiet record pressed into rock patient enough to hold it for hundreds of millions of years. Pressed into the rock, kept there without ceremony. A record that asked nothing and was given everything the stone could offer, which was time and pressure and silence. Tonight, the mountains that will one day be made of this stone exist only here, in the dark, in the falling, in the slow building of what seems like nothing into something that will eventually stand against a sky and hold clouds and split rivers and catch snow and turn gold in the last light of a long afternoon. That is where this is going. The beginning is enough. The dark and the falling and the slow building of what will one day become something vast. The ocean above is still. The floor below is patient. The dark between them holds everything that has ever fallen through it, every layer, every record, every quiet arrival that no living thing was present to witness. The building continues, as it always has, as it always will. The ocean has been quiet for a very long time. The shells have been falling. The layers have been building. The floor has been receiving everything the sea sends down to it, without complaint, without pause, the way it has always done and will always do. But something is changing, not at the surface. Not in the warm, bright water where the plankton drift and the light filters down in long, pale columns. Not anywhere you could see or feel or measure with anything available to the creatures living here. The change is happening far below, deeper than the sediment, deeper than the rock beneath the sediment, deeper than the crust itself, in the mantle. That vast river of flowing rock, 300 kilometers beneath the surface of the earth, is moving. It has always been moving. It will always be moving. But right now, the particular currents within it are doing something that will, over a vast stretch of time, completely rearrange the surface of this part of the planet. They are pulling two pieces of the crust toward each other, so gradually that if you had been standing on the shore of this ancient ocean and watching, you would have seen nothing. You would have felt nothing. You would have had no reason to suspect that anything at all was different from the way it had always been. And yet the distance was closing. The distance closes the way all distances close under forces that never stop. Not through any single movement, but through the accumulation of movements too small to name. No creature that has ever lived has been long-lived enough to watch a continent move. Not even the oldest trees. Not even the simplest bacteria. The motion is entirely invisible to life, and yet it is the most powerful force that shapes this planet's surface. Picture this ocean at night. The surface is black and still. Stars are reflected in it without trembling. The water is that calm. The air above it is warm and carries the faint salt smell of open sea. No land is visible in any direction. No sound except the lightest movement of water against itself. And beneath all of that stillness, beneath the surface and the sediment and the crust, the deep rock is doing what it has always done, moving in directions nothing alive will ever directly feel. Above, the stars wheel slowly across the sky. Below, the continents drift. The scales are different, but the motion is the same. Immense, unhurried, indifferent to the brief lives that flicker across the surface between them. The ocean surface holds the reflection of the stars without trembling. The water has been this still before and will be this still again. The deep below continues its work without any knowledge of the sky above. The two landmasses are getting closer. Between them, the ocean grows narrower. Not visibly, not in any year that any creature lives through, but over millions of years the far shores are approaching. The water between them is becoming shallower at the edges. The floor of the ocean is beginning to feel the change in pressure as the plates above begin to respond to what the mantle below is asking of them. And now something begins that has never happened to this particular piece of ocean floor before. The floor begins to bend, not sharply, not suddenly, just the faintest tilt downward at the leading edge. The place where the ocean floor meets the approaching continent begins to angle very slightly toward the Earth's interior, a degree or two over 1,000,000 years, then a few more degrees, then more. The ocean floor is beginning to descend. Think of a very slow, very heavy thing tipping forward, the leading edge going down, the back edge still flat, the whole motion taking 10 million years to complete what would take a second if you pushed a book off a table. That is what is happening here. The oceanic floor, dense and heavy, made of dark volcanic rock that has been sitting at the bottom of this sea for 100 million years, is beginning to slide downward beneath the edge of the approaching continent, down into the earth, down into heat, down into pressure, and as it goes, it takes everything with it. All that sediment we have been watching accumulate, all those layers of mudstone and sandstone and limestone, all those compressed shells, all that volcanic ash from distant eruptions, all those quiet records of everything that fell through this water for so long, all of it carried downward, into a heat and pressure that will transform everything it touches into something unrecognizable. Somewhere far from here, somewhere that does not yet exist, a mountain valley will one day hold a river of blue-white ice. The glacier will move through it on a cold morning under a pale sky, scraping the rock walls smooth, carrying stones for miles before releasing them in a gravel fan at its lower edge. Snow will fall across the valley in long, soft curtains, covering the moraines, covering the rocky peaks above, covering everything in a silence that has no equivalent in the lower world. None of that exists yet. It is all locked inside this descending rock, in the dark, in the heat, waiting for the forces that will eventually lift it toward the light. But for now, just the descent, just the dark, just the long, wordless journey downward into the deep earth. As the ocean floor descends beneath the edge of the continent, it encounters resistance, the uppermost layers of sediment, the ones that have not been compressed as deeply, the ones still relatively soft and light, cannot follow the plate all the way down. They are too light, too loosely bound to the rock below them. As the plate descends, these upper layers are scraped off, the way frost is scraped from a window. They do not go down. They pile up. They fold against the edge of the advancing continent. They crumple the way a piece of paper crumples when you push it gently from both ends. They stack against each other. They arch upward in some places and buckle downward in others. They begin, very slowly, to thicken. Think of snow being pushed by a very gentle plough. The snow does not disappear beneath the plough. It builds in front of it. It grows deeper and wider as more is pushed against it. That is what is happening here, except instead of snow, it is rock. And instead of a plough moving at walking speed, it is a continent moving at the speed of a growing fingernail. And instead of minutes, the pile takes tens of millions of years to build. But it builds. And here, for the first time in this entire story, something is moving upward. For all the long time this story has been unfolding, everything moved downward. Shells fell. Sediment settled, layers accumulated. The weight of everything above pressed everything below a little deeper into the earth. Downward, always downward. And now, so gently that no instrument could have detected it, the direction has changed. Something is rising. Not much. Not yet. Not in any way that would produce a hill, let alone a mountain. just a very slight thickening of the crust in the collision zone, a gentle arching of rock layers that were once flat, a whisper of upward motion in the midst of all the long downward settling. But it is there. The direction has changed. Imagine the future valley of that change on a clear winter night. The air is sharp and cold and absolutely still. Snow covers every surface, the rock, the talus slopes, the frozen river, the high ledges where nothing grows. The sky above is the deep blue-black of high altitude, and in it the stars are extraordinarily bright, unfiltered by the thick, warm air of lower places. A ridge runs against the horizon like a blade, and above it, a single planet burning steadily in the west. That ridge does not exist yet, not even as a thought, not even as a direction. But the forces that will build it are already at work, deep below an ocean that no longer has a name, on a planet that has not yet been given one by anything alive. The night air above those future mountains is very cold and very clear. Stars burn in it without flickering. The ridge that does not yet exist will one day cast a shadow across a valley that does not yet exist on a morning that is still millions of years away. Deep beneath the collision zone, the descending plate is being changed. The rock that was once the floor of a warm, shallow ocean is now being carried into regions of the Earth that no ocean floor has touched before. The pressure here is immense. The weight of kilometers of rock pressing down from above has no equivalent in the surface world. Nothing in our daily experience prepares us for it, and the temperature is rising. The Earth grows hotter as you go deeper. The rock that was once lying quietly on the floor of a peaceful ocean, receiving the gentle fall of shells in the dark, is now entering temperatures that have no equivalent in anything that lives on the surface. Hot enough to melt metal, hot enough to change the behavior of solid stone. The rock does not melt, not yet, but it begins to move differently under that heat, to respond to pressure in ways it could not at the surface. This is where something remarkable happens. Under heat and pressure, rock changes. Not into liquid, not yet, into something different from what it was, something denser, something that carries within its new crystal structure the record of everything it has been through. The names of what it becomes do not need to stay. Let them arrive and drift on, the way all things drift in the deep. The soft mudstone made of compressed clay becomes slate. Slate is dark and fine and flat. It splits naturally into thin, smooth sheets. If you have ever seen a slate roof or held a piece of slate in your hands, you have held something that was once soft clay on the floor of an ancient sea. The pressure that made it is written into its structure. The direction from which that pressure came is written into the way it splits. With more heat and more pressure, the slate becomes something called schist. Schist glitters. It is full of tiny crystals, flat and reflective, that catch light and throw it back in silver flashes. A piece of schist held up to a window will sparkle like something scattered with stars. Each crystal grew under pressure, rearranging itself deep underground, each one a tiny mirror of a force that acted on it far below any surface. With even more heat and more pressure, the schist becomes gneiss. Gneiss is banded. It looks almost like wood grain frozen into stone, light layers and dark layers alternating, running parallel to each other, recording in their arrangement the direction of the enormous forces that shaped them. Something held lightly across an enormous reach of time. The sandstone, made of compressed grains of ancient beaches, becomes something dense and white and almost translucent at the edges. So hard it resists almost everything. What was once loose sand on a shore is now a single interlocked mass of crystals, nearly indestructible. And the limestone, made of the shells of ancient creatures, becomes marble. Cool to the touch, smooth, subtly veined in grey or pink or green. The shells that once made up the limestone have been completely recrystallized. But sometimes, where the transformation was less complete, you can still see the ghost of what was there before. The faint outline of a shell, the echo of a fossil. Its original detail gone, but its shape still present, like a memory held lightly in the stone. Think of these transformed rocks not as they are now, in the deep, but as they will one day appear. A wall of pale stone high on a mountain face, catching the first light of a winter morning. The sun just clearing a distant ridge, touching the stone, making it glow for a few minutes before the shadows return. A stream running over dark banded rock in a narrow valley, the water clear as glass, catching the light in small bright sparks where it breaks over the edges. A cliff of folded layers above a meadow, running in long curves that echo the shape of the valley below, as if the mountain and the valley were made from the same gesture. All of that stone is forming right now, in the deep, under pressure, in the roots of something that does not yet have a name. The imagined mountain is quiet. The cold air moves through a meadow of alpine grass, bending the stems softly, carrying the faint sound of water from somewhere below the ridge. All of it still forming, deep and slow, in rock that has not yet found its way to the surface. The rock is folding. Deep beneath the collision zone, the layers that were once perfectly flat, laid down horizontally on the ocean floor over a vast stretch of time, are being bent. Imagine picking up a thick stack of papers and pushing both ends toward each other. The stack does not stay flat. It buckles, it bends. Some pages arch upward, forming a curve. Others dip downward between the arches. The whole stack becomes a series of waves, some cresting up, some dipping down. Rock does exactly the same thing, on a scale that makes the stack of papers seem like a thought from a dream. A single fold in the deep rocks beneath this collision zone might span 100 kilometers from one side to the other. It takes 10 million years to form. Each individual moment of that folding is utterly imperceptible to anything living on the surface. And yet the fold is real, permanent, written into the rock with a permanence that no surface process will ever fully erase. The upward arches have a name. The downward dips have a name too. But the names can drift past without landing. What matters is the image, great waves of stone, kilometers from crest to trough. Not waves of water that crash and break and disappear. Waves of solid rock that take 10 million years to complete a single crest and will still be visible in cliff faces and quarry walls hundreds of millions of years from now. And as the rock folds, the folds carry the layers upward, fold by fold. The material that has been buried and compressed is beginning to travel toward the surface. Not in any straight line, not in any way that anything alive has ever witnessed, but upward, always now, upward, far above where these rocks will eventually rise. A future sky waits, high clouds drifting from west to east, snowfields on north-facing slopes that never quite melt, even in the short mountain summer. Mist gathering in the valleys each morning and burning off by mid-afternoon, leaving the air clean and cold and smelling of stone and distance. Ravens turning in long circles on the updrafts above the cliffs, black against the pale sky, calling once and then falling silent. All of that is in the rock. Not yet, but waiting, the way all futures wait, in the deep structure of the present. Something else is happening in the deep rocks at the same time. The rock of the descending plate, as it sinks deeper and is heated, begins to release the water locked inside it. Water that has been trapped in the crystal structure of minerals since they formed on the ancient seafloor. Water that the ocean left behind in the rock, molecule by molecule, over millions of years of quiet accumulation. Under heat, that water is squeezed out. It begins to rise through the rock above. Just water. Rising through rock, finding the tiny spaces between crystals, the minute pathways along grain boundaries, the almost invisible channels through which fluid can move if given enough time and enough pressure. Moving upward, the way water always moves when given the chance. As this water rises into the hot rock above the descending plate, it lowers the melting point. The rock that would otherwise have remained solid begins, in the presence of this rising water, to melt. Not all at once. Not in any dramatic way. just at the edges, just in the weakest zones, just enough to create, quietly, small pockets of liquid rock in the middle of all that solid stone. This liquid rock is called magma, and magma is lighter than the solid rock around it, so it rises. It finds the cracks and weaknesses in the rock above it. It pushes upward through them over thousands of years. Sometimes it travels all the way to the surface and erupts as a volcano. More often it travels only partway. It intrudes into the rock above and around the growing collision zone, and there, deep underground, it cools, very slowly, over millions of years. When magma cools underground, the crystals that form have time to grow large. The rock that results is granite. Granite. If you have ever run your hand across a granite countertop or a granite boulder on a hillside, you have felt the texture of rock that cooled deep underground millions of years ago. The individual crystals visible to the naked eye, grey and black and pink and white, interlocked, dense, almost impossibly hard. Enormous bodies of granite are forming right now, deep beneath this collision zone, cooling over millions of years into the most durable material the Earth makes. They will eventually be pushed upward by the forces building around them. They will form the hard, cold, sparkling cores of mountains. And when the softer rock around them has eroded away, they will be the last thing standing. Picture a granite peak on a clear autumn evening. The light has gone from the sky, but the stone still holds a faint warmth from the day's sun. Below the peak, a lake reflects the first stars. The water is the color of dark glass. Around its edges, rocks worn smooth by an ancient glacier sit, half submerged, pale against the black water. The air is absolutely still. A single bird crosses the lake without sound and disappears into the shadow of the far shore. That stone is forming right now, in the deep, under enormous pressure, taking the time it needs to take. When it surfaces, it will hold the cold mountain light as if it were made for nothing else. The collision zone is changing shape. The folded and compressed rock is thickening. The granite rising from below is adding its volume to the growing mass. The layers that were once flat on the ocean floor are now tilted and folded and stacked against each other in arrangements that would have seemed impossible if you had watched them being laid down. And the crust beneath this region is growing deeper. Mountains do not just grow upward, they grow downward first. For every metre of mountain that eventually rises above sea level, many more metres of root must first reach down into the earth below. The crust thickens beneath a mountain range before it thickens above it. The foundation goes deep before the peak appears. Think of a tree. Before the trunk rises, before the branches spread. Before the first leaf appears above the soil, the roots are already deep, already finding water, already anchoring what is to come. Mountains are like that. Right now, in the collision zone, there is nothing above the water. The surface of the ocean is flat and calm and gives no hint of what is building beneath it. A creature swimming at the surface would see only water in every direction. No reason to suspect that far below, the crust is thickening. That rock is folding. That granite is cooling. That the roots of something enormous are reaching downward into the deep. But they are. The mountain is building its foundation in darkness and pressure and heat, in the deep roots that no one will ever see, long before it shows any sign of existing at the surface. Above that future mountain, on a night that is still a very long way away, the sky will be very dark and very clear. The kind of clear that only exists at altitude, where the air is thin and dry and carries almost no dust to scatter the starlight. The Milky Way will be a river of cold light from one horizon to the other. Snow on the summit will catch that light and hold it, glowing faintly, the highest and coldest and quietest thing in the landscape. None of that exists yet. The roots are still growing downward. The deep is still complete. But root by root, fold by fold, the work is continuing in the quiet below. The ocean above is still calm. The surface is flat and blue. The light filters down through the upper waters in long, pale columns. The shells are drifting. The sediment is settling onto the floor. But the floor is different now. In the collision zone, the floor is thicker, heavier, folded and compressed and pushed upward from below by rising granite. The layers that were once peaceful and horizontal have been tilted and arched and buckled into arrangements that record the enormous forces acting on them. And deep beneath the surface of the water, the highest parts of the collision zone are beginning to approach the light. The water is getting shallower, slowly, invisibly. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the floor in this region is rising toward the surface. The light from above reaches a little further toward it each century. The creatures that live at different depths begin, without knowing why, to find themselves in waters slightly warmer than the waters their ancestors knew. The currents feel different. The pressure is different. Something in the world has shifted, though nothing alive can name it or trace it to its source. The ocean is becoming a shallower place. And then, one day, in a year indistinguishable from any other year in the 10 million years before it, a small rocky surface breaks through the waves. Just for a moment, just at low tide, a patch of wet grey stone, visible above the water for a few hours and then submerged again, covered by the sea, hidden, gone. But it was there. For the first time in 100 million years, this rock has touched air, felt the wind, felt the cold, felt the specific quality of light that exists above the surface of the water, sharp and direct and unfiltered by depth. And then the tide came in and covered it again. But the next day, at low tide, it was there again. And the day after that, and the year after that, over 10,000 years, the area that remained above the water grew from a patch to a field. Over 100,000 years to something wider still. The ocean still surrounded it on all sides. There were no trees yet, no grass, no soil. Just bare, wet rock, dark with moisture, catching light and releasing it, breathing salt air for the first time. The surface of this new rock is extraordinary in the way that new things are always extraordinary. Not because it is beautiful, but because it has never existed before. The colour of it is dark, a deep grey-green where the sea has worked at it, almost black in the hollows where the tide pools have formed. Small creatures have already begun to arrive. Barnacles, limpets, things that know how to grip and hold and wait out the tide. They ask almost nothing of the rock. They simply adhere, the way everything that endures eventually adheres, and begin the long, quiet work of being present. On a clear night above this new bare island, the stars would have looked nearly the same as they look tonight above wherever you are lying. The same slow rotation of the sky around the pole, the same quality of darkness between the stars. The light that once fell on that wet, dark rock and the light falling on you now travels the same distances from the same ancient sources. The rock has been here a long time. The sky has been here longer. And somewhere below, the floor is still rising. A fraction here, a fraction there, taking the time it takes. The roots are deep. The direction has changed. And the most ancient process on this planet is continuing its work, as it always has, as it always will, through every night that has ever existed on the surface of this world. The rock has broken the surface. A small wet presence above the waves, appearing briefly at low tide, being covered again, appearing again, being covered again. The ocean does not release its territory easily. For every increment the rock rises, the waves work to reclaim it. Salt spray crosses every surface. Storm water finds every crack. The sea has been here far longer than this small new thing pushing upward from below. But the rock endures, and the force pushing it upward has been building for a very long time. So it rises, steadily, year by year, decade by decade. The small rocky outcrop that appeared briefly at low tide grows into something that stays above the water even at high tide. Then it grows into something larger. The waves still crash against it, still carry grains of it back to the sea. But the rock rises faster than the waves can take it away. And then another outcrop appears nearby. And another. Over thousands of years, what was open ocean becomes a chain of small bare islands, low and rocky and battered by surf. No soil, no plants above the waterline, just grey stone facing the open water, wearing the marks of everything the sea has thrown at it. Something new in the world, something that did not exist before, small and bare and beginning the long process of becoming what it will one day be. The air around these new islands smells of salt and cold rock. Waves break against the stone and pull back in a long whisper. Above, the sky is pale and wide and moving. A single bird crosses from east to west, high up, and disappears into the distance without looking down. The stone does not notice. It is simply there, as it will be there tomorrow, and the year after that, and the 10,000 years after that, receiving the wind, receiving the rain, wearing its newness patiently into something older and more settled and more completely itself. At night, the sea around these islands moves in long, dark swells. The surface catches what little light exists. A faint phosphorescence sometimes, where the water is disturbed, and then releases it. The sound of the ocean against the new stone is steady and low, and has been the same sound since the first wave met the first shore. The stone does not answer. It simply receives each wave and holds its ground, which is, in the end, what stone has always done and will always do. The islands are growing. The tectonic forces that have been building for 50 million years are still operating. The plate is still pushing. The rock is still being folded and compressed deep below. The roots of this future mountain range are still reaching deeper into the earth, and the surface, responding to all that pressure from below, is still rising. The islands grow taller. They grow wider. Over hundreds of thousands of years, they begin to connect. What were channels of shallow water between separate islands become shallower still, and then exposed, and then dry land. What was seafloor between the islands becomes low ground. Valleys form where the water once was. The ocean retreats from these new heights. Gradually, as though reluctant to release land it has held for 100 million years, it leaves behind evidence of itself. Salt flats, smooth stones, the particular flatness of ground that was once a seafloor. The land remembers what it was, even as it becomes something new. And then something happens that has not happened over this particular piece of ground in all that time. Rain falls. Rain falling on land. Rain that lands on bare rock and does not immediately mix with the sea. Rain that collects in low places and begins to flow downhill, finding the path of least resistance, joining other drops, becoming a trickle, becoming a stream. The first rivers appear. They are small, thin, barely rivers at all by any modern standard. But moving water on land is one of the most powerful sculptors this planet has ever known. Every drop carries something. Every stream is picking up grains of rock and moving them somewhere lower. Every river is, from the very first moment of its existence, doing the work that will eventually wear these mountains back to plains. But that ending is very far away. The mountains are still rising faster than the rivers can remove them, and the rain is still falling. Think of rain on bare rock. The sound of it. Rain on bare stone has a different quality from rain on rooftops or leaves or grass. Harder, cleaner, each drop distinct. The stone reflects the sound back rather than absorbing it. Then the water moves off in thin sheets, finding every slight angle in the rock, gathering in every hollow, beginning its long work. The same work it has been doing on every rain-touched surface of this planet since the first clouds formed and the first water fell. Rain on old stone, steady and clean and ancient. There is a particular quality to the silence between raindrops on rock, a brief moment after each drop strikes and before the next one lands. That is unlike any other silence. It is the silence of something in motion between its movements, the silence of the world taking a breath. And then another drop, and another silence, and the rain goes on, doing what rain has always done, unhurried and entirely without purpose except the purpose of falling. Water finds the lowest place and goes there, always the lowest place, always the path of least resistance, always, without exception, downhill. And in finding its way downhill, it reshapes everything it passes through. The rivers that form on these new mountains are gentle at first. They carry fine sediment. They cut shallow channels in the soft rock near the surface. They deposit what they carry in the low places where their speed decreases, building small deltas at their mouths where they return their sediment to the sea. But as the mountains grow taller, the rivers grow more powerful. A river falling from a greater height carries more energy. More energy means faster water. Faster water means larger particles can be carried. Larger particles scrape more powerfully against the riverbed. And the riverbed, scraped and ground by those particles year after year, century after century, grows deeper. The valley deepens. Think of the Grand Canyon for a moment. A mile deep. 10 miles wide in places. 277 miles long. All of it carved by the Colorado River, working for about 5 million years. 5 million years is swift by geological standards. And yet 5 million years of water cutting through solid rock produces something so vast that people stand at its rim and feel the particular smallness that comes from encountering something genuinely beyond scale. The canyon walls glow amber and rose at sunset. Layer after layer of rock exposed, each one a different color, each one a different chapter in the same long story. The pale limestone at the top, the darker sandstones below it, the ancient schist at the very bottom, nearly 2 billion years old, dark and dense and almost impossible to comprehend. A river moves through all of it, green and cold and still working, still cutting, still carrying everything it touches toward the sea. At night, the canyon fills with shadow from the bottom upward. The deepest parts go dark first, then the mid-levels, then the rim, the last edge of orange light fading from the stone as the stars come out above it, first one, then a dozen, then the whole sky thrown across the black in a scatter that the pale canyon walls catch as a faint reflected glow. Far below, the river moves through its darkness, doing what it has always done, carrying its freight of dissolved minerals and fine sand, patient and continuous, the sound of it rising faintly through hundreds of meters of still air to the rim above. The river does not know what it has made. It does not know that people travel from every part of the world to stand at the edge of its work and fall quiet in a way they rarely fall quiet anywhere else. It simply moves, the way it has always moved, toward the sea it has always been moving toward, one drop at a time, carrying what it can, releasing what it must. The mountains are getting taller. Year by year, the peaks are pushing higher. The roots below are deeper. The crust beneath the range is thicker. And as the mountains rise, they begin to do something that changes everything around them. They change the weather. When a mountain range grows tall enough, it becomes a wall across the sky. Clouds moving freely across the land encounter this wall and are forced upward. As they rise, they cool. As they cool, they release their moisture. It falls as rain on the mountain's windward slopes. More rain than would fall anywhere else in the region, wrung from every cloud that crosses. And all that rain feeds the rivers. The rivers grow stronger. They cut deeper and faster into the valleys they have been carving. The mountains grow more dramatic because the valleys beside the rising peaks are being carved deeper at the same time. The difference between the highest point and the lowest growing larger with each passing century. On the other side of the mountains, something different happens. The air that has crossed the peaks has lost its moisture. It descends on the far side, dry and warming. A desert forms there, in the rain shadow of the mountains, where almost no rainfall reaches. Two completely different worlds, separated by a single line of peaks. On the wet side, cloud forests thick with moss, rivers full and fast, the constant sound of water falling somewhere just out of sight, ferns growing from cliff faces. the air so heavy with moisture it feels almost solid. Mist threading through the tree canopy in long, slow ribbons, thinning and thickening as the temperature shifts through the day. Everything here is green, in every shade of green that exists. The bright, almost yellow green of new growth, the deep blue-green of old moss, the grey-green of lichen on bark, the particular translucent green of a large leaf held up against the sky. On the dry side, red rock and silence. A landscape the colour of rust and bone. The air so clear that distances dissolve, and a ridge that looks close enough to walk to before lunch might take 3 days. Stars at night with nothing between them and the eye. The sound of wind moving across open ground, carrying nothing with it except the smell of warm stone and the particular dryness that has its own quality, its own texture, like breathing something that has been very clean for a very long time. The mountain creates both at the same time, simply by being where it is. The rain does not choose which side to fall on. The wind does not choose which side to dry. The mountain simply stands, and the weather arranges itself around it, and two completely different worlds come into being on either side of the same ridge. At the highest elevations, where the air is thin and cold and the temperature stays below freezing for most of the year, something new is beginning. Snow is falling. Snow that arrives faster than it can melt. Snow that accumulates year after year, layer upon layer, the new falling on top of the old compressed by the weight of what comes after. In the first years, it is just snow, deep snow, clean and white and still. But as the years become decades and the decades become centuries, the snow at the bottom of the pile is changing. Each unique and intricate crystal is being pressed together with the others. The air between them is being squeezed out. The light, fluffy thing that fell from the sky is becoming something denser and harder. It becomes fern, granular, compacted, like snow that has been packed very tightly and then left to settle further on its own. It has weight, density, a solidity that suggests it is becoming something else. If you pressed your hand into fern, it would not give the way fresh snow gives. It would hold its shape. It would push back, gently, the way something does when it has decided what it is. And then, under the weight of many more years of snowfall above it, the fern becomes ice, glacial ice, dense and old and blue. If you have never seen the inside of a glacier, you might not know about that color. Ice that is deep enough and old enough and compressed enough to have lost almost all its trapped air turns a shade of blue that has no equivalent in ordinary experience. Not the pale blue of a winter sky, something deeper, something that seems to come from within the ice itself rather than from any reflected light. A color that belongs to depth rather than surface. A color that the eye registers as both familiar and completely strange. The way certain moments feel when you know you are somewhere you have never been, but cannot quite say why it feels that way. Imagine a crevasse opening in a high glacier on a cloudless afternoon, the walls of it dropping away into deep shadow. The blue at the surface, bright, startling, deepening as your eye travels down into it, shifting through shade after shade until, at the bottom, it becomes something approaching indigo. Something that is almost the color of the night sky, held inside a solid wall of ice in full mountain daylight. The cold rising from it is steady and absolute. The silence inside a crevasse is the silence of a place that has never heard anything except its own slow internal movement. Above the crevasse, the glacier surface stretches back toward the snowfields, white and endlessly textured, ridged and folded by the forces working on it from below and above. The sky at that altitude is the hard, definite blue of height, deep, cloudless, the sun bright but giving less warmth than it seems to promise. A cold wind moves across the ice surface, picking up fine crystals and carrying them a short distance before setting them down again, the same wind that has crossed this glacier every afternoon for 10,000 years, doing the same small work each time. Nothing else is moving. When the ice grows thick enough, it flows. A metre per day in the fastest glaciers. A metre per year in the slowest. Pulled downhill by gravity. filling the valleys below the high snowfields, pushing forward, carrying everything frozen into its base. Boulders, gravel, sand, material ground from the rock it travels over, held in the frozen grip of the glacier like tools in an enormously powerful and completely unhurried hand. The glacier is one of the most powerful sculptors the Earth has ever known. A river cuts a valley in a V shape. The water focuses at the bottom, cutting deepest there, leaving the sides to erode more slowly. A glacier fills the whole valley. It erodes the floor and the walls and the corners, everything it touches, with equal persistence. And the valley it leaves behind when it finally retreats is wide and flat at the bottom, steep and smooth on the sides, the shape of something that has been completely filled and then, over thousands of years, gently emptied. A wide glacier-carved valley on a summer evening. The meadow floor green with short alpine grass, a river braiding through the middle of it, cold and clear, its stones rounded and pale. The light comes in low from the west, throwing the valley walls into long shadow while the meadow floor still holds the warmth of the afternoon. A herd of chamois moves through the far end of the meadow, unhurried, crossing into the shadow of the trees at the valley's edge. The sound of the river fills the whole space. Not loudly, but completely, the way a sound does when there is nothing else to compete with it, when the air is still and the mountains on either side hold everything close. Above all of it, the peaks still hold snow, white against the darkening sky. The color draining slowly from the stone, leaving only the cold blue-grey of rock in shadow and, high above, a faint rose still lingering on the topmost ridge where the last of the light is making its slow way toward dark. It will be there for a few minutes more, and then the ridge will be grey like everything else, and the stars will come. At the heads of the glaciers, where the snow first accumulates and the ice first forms, something is happening to the mountain itself. Water seeps into the cracks in the rock during the day when temperatures rise slightly. At night, when the temperature drops below freezing, that water freezes. Ice, when it freezes, expands. It pushes outward against the walls of whatever crack it fills with a force that solid rock cannot indefinitely resist. The crack widens. Over hundreds of thousands of freeze-thaw cycles, over thousands of years of daily temperature swings, the crack becomes a crevice. The crevice becomes a gap. And eventually the gap becomes large enough that a piece of the cliff face breaks free and falls. This process, repetitive and invisible to any single observer, carves a bowl into the mountainside, a deep, steep-walled, roughly circular hollow where the glacier accumulates and from which it flows. This hollow has a name, a cirque, a high mountain amphitheater carved by the repetition of freezing and thawing day after day, year after year, for as long as the ice has been present. To stand inside a cirque in summer, when the ice has retreated and the walls of it rise on three sides in a great curving sweep of bare grey rock, is to feel very small in a way that is strangely peaceful. The rock above is streaked with the marks of what was here. Scoured smooth in some places, left rough in others, the story of the ice written across the stone in a script that takes a long time to learn to read. When two cirques carve backward into the same mountain from opposite sides, they leave between them only a narrow ridge of rock. A wall so thin and steep that it seems impossible it could have survived the forces that shaped it. Sharp as a blade, running for kilometers along the spine of the mountain. This ridge is called an arete, and where three or more cirques carve backward into the same peak from different directions, they leave only a sharp pyramid of rock at the summit. All the softer material has been taken away by ice and gravity and time. What remains is the hardest, most resistant core, a horn. The Matterhorn in the Swiss Alps is the most famous example, that perfect pyramid rising above the surrounding landscape, its four steep faces falling away in four directions, its summit a sharp point against the sky. It looks like something designed, something intentional, a shape too perfect to have arrived by chance. But it was revealed, not designed. The glacier took things away. It removed everything that was not the Matterhorn over millions of years until only the essential shape remained. All the material that was not essential went slowly downhill, carried in the ice, deposited in the valleys below, returning eventually to the rivers and the sea in the long, slow cycle from which it came. And what was left, what could not be taken, became the thing that people now travel from every part of the world to look at and feel small beside. On a clear winter night, the Matterhorn stands against a sky so full of stars that the mountain itself seems to float. The snow on its faces catches what little light exists and holds it as a faint, cold glow. The air at that altitude on a still night carries an absolute silence. The silence of something so vast and so settled that sound seems beside the point. The shadow of the peak falls across the valley below, a long, dark shape on the snow, pointing east toward wherever the night is deepest. Nothing moves. Nothing needs to. The mountain stands above its own shadow, and the stars move above the mountain, and the night goes on, as it has always gone on, over every peak that has ever risen high enough to cast a shadow across the valley below. Now the mountains of the world, one by one, a slow drift through the great ranges that stand tonight on the surface of this planet, each one built by the same forces we have been following, each one still changing in ways nothing alive will ever fully witness. The Alps. At dusk. The valleys below are already in shadow. The light has left the lower slopes and retreated upward, touching only the highest peaks. Those peaks, in the last minutes before full dark, glow. Orange first, then rose. Then a deep pink that fades slowly to grey as the sun drops below the horizon and the colour drains from the sky. The valleys go dark while the summits hold the light a little longer, as though the mountains are reluctant to release the day. This happens every evening, in every season, and people who live in the valleys below have watched it for as long as people have lived in alpine valleys, which is a very long time. They have names for the colour. In Italian, it is called alpenglow. In German, Alpenglehen. The mountain catching fire at the end of the day, briefly, and then returning to stone. The air above the tree line carries only the smell of stone and snow, not the complicated layered smells of the valley with its forests and rivers and villages. Just stone, just cold, just the faint mineral clarity of rock that has been rained on for 30 million years and still smells only of itself. There is nothing in that air to remind you of any other place. It is completely itself, completely here, and breathing it for the first time is like breathing something that has never been breathed before, though of course it has, by everyone who has ever climbed high enough to reach it. The Swiss lakes lie in the valleys below. Their extraordinary colour comes partly from depth and partly from glacial flour still suspended in the water. Fine powder ground from rock by glaciers that retreated thousands of years ago, still drifting slowly through the water column, still turning the surface that pale, impossible blue-green that people travel from every part of the world to see and then find difficult to describe when they return home. It is a colour that belongs to those lakes and those mountains and nowhere else on Earth. On a still morning, the lake surface reflects the mountains above so perfectly that it is difficult to tell where the mountain ends and the reflection begins. Two mountains, one rising and one descending, meeting at the surface in perfect silence. The reflected mountain hangs below the real one, inverted, motionless. A breath of wind would shatter it into ripples. But there is no wind yet. The air is cold and the water is cold and the morning has not yet decided to begin. The light is grey and even and comes from everywhere at once, and the mountains in it look like something that has always been there and will always be there, which is, in all the ways that matter, true. The Himalayas, the youngest and tallest mountains on Earth. 50 million years ago, what is now India was moving northward through the ancient Tethys Ocean, the same warm sea whose floor we watched at the beginning of tonight. India was closing the distance to Asia across a body of water so wide it took 50 million years to cross. When India met Asia, the Tethys Ocean floor began to descend. The ocean grew shallower. Its floor disappeared into the mantle, and then the continental crust of India itself arrived at the collision zone. Continental crust cannot descend. It is too buoyant. So instead it crumpled, it thickened, and it rose. India has not stopped moving. It is still pushing northward at about 5 centimeters per year. The Himalayas are still rising. Mount Everest gains a few millimeters of height every year. Every year the monsoon rains fall on its slopes, and the rivers carry pieces of it down to the plains below and eventually to the sea. The floor of the Tethys Ocean is the summit of Everest. When climbers reach the top of the highest mountain on Earth, they stand on marine limestone, rock formed from the shells of creatures that swam in a warm, shallow sea. Fossils are found there, the remains of ocean creatures, pressed into rock, carried 9 kilometers above the sea they lived in by the collision of 2 continents over an immensity of time. The ocean became the mountain and brought its creatures with it all the way to the top of the world. At the summit on a clear night, the stars are brighter than anywhere else on Earth. The atmosphere above is so thin that the light passes through almost nothing before reaching the eye. The temperature drops far below what any living thing unprotected could survive. The wind, when it blows, carries a low, continuous sound like the ocean, toneless, vast, carrying nothing except its own enormity. The climbers who have stood there describe a quality of light that exists nowhere else. The stars so sharp and so close that the space between them seems not like darkness, but like the edges of something, like the world laid bare above the weather, above the atmosphere, above everything that usually stands between an eye and the night sky. Down on the lower slopes, far below, the monsoon forests hold a different kind of dark. Rhododendron trees grip steep slopes, their canopies thick and overlapping. Cloud moves through them in the early morning, cold enough to leave droplets on every surface. The smell of wet bark and moss and something sweet underneath. Flowers somewhere in the green above, invisible but present, the way many things in these forests are present without being visible. The sound of water is constant here. Streams, drips, the slow, steady movement of moisture through leaves and roots and stone, the mountain releasing what the monsoon has given it, one drop at a time, back toward the lowland rivers and eventually the sea. Between that warmth and the frozen summit, all the weather of the world passes through. The Andes, 6,000 kilometers long, running the entire western edge of South America from Colombia in the north to the cold southern tip of Chile and Argentina. The longest mountain range on Earth by a considerable margin. The Andes were built by the floor of the Pacific Ocean sliding beneath the edge of South America. As it descends, it generates magma. That magma rises into the Andes as volcanoes, some of the highest on Earth, still active, still building, their summits trailing faint plumes that the wind disperses against the wide blue sky. At night, the active ones glow very faintly at their craters, a deep orange red that is visible for a long distance in the clear mountain air, a color that belongs to something much older than the mountain itself, coming from the interior of the Earth where the heat has never changed since the planet formed. The Andes create 2 worlds on their 2 sides. On the western side, facing the Pacific, the mountains have captured all the moisture from the incoming winds. The Atacama Desert lies in this rain shadow. Parts of it have not received measurable rainfall in 500 years. A landscape so dry that certain organisms survive only by absorbing moisture from coastal fog that rolls in from the ocean each morning, condensing on leaf surfaces and dripping to the ground where nothing else could provide water. The rocks here are extraordinarily old and extraordinarily unchanged. The lack of water means almost nothing weathers, almost nothing erodes, almost nothing is different from the way it was 1 million years ago. At night in the Atacama, the sky holds everything. No moisture in the air, no dust, no light for 100 kilometers in any direction. The stars come down almost to the horizon, and the Milky Way is so bright it casts a faint shadow on the pale ground below. The cold settles into the stone and the stone holds it, and the only warmth is what the rock absorbed during the day, still radiating gently upward into the dark hours, and a person lying on the ground in the Atacama at midnight might feel that warmth rising from below, even as the air above grows colder, the earth giving back what the sun gave it, slowly, through the long still hours. On the eastern side, the cloud forests drip. The trees carry more moss and more epiphytes than almost any forest on earth. Everything is wet. Brilliant birds move through a green so deep it seems painted. Tanagers and tucans and tiny hummingbirds working the flowers in the understory, their colors almost luminous in the dim forest light. The sound here is the sound of water finding its way through everything. Through leaves, through roots, through the dark peaty soil, through the stones of small streams that appear and disappear under fern cover. A constant soft sound. A sound like the mountain breathing. One range, two worlds. The clear, dry silence of the desert sky on one side. The warm dampness of the cloud forest with rain on leaves and water running close on the other. The mountain holds both, tonight, as it has always held both. Its two faces turn to two completely different weathers, its stone indifferent to both, its roots going equally deep on either side. The Scottish Highlands, ancient beyond easy imagination. The mountains of Scotland are what remains of a range that was once as high as the Himalayas. 450 million years ago, when two ancient continents collided, they built mountains perhaps 5 or 6 kilometers high. Mountains that would have dwarfed anything in Europe today. Those mountains are almost entirely gone now. What remains in Scotland are the roots. The deepest and most resistant part of what was once an enormous range, worn down over 450 million years of patient erosion to low rounded hills. The highest point in the British Isles is Ben Nevis, at just under 1,350 metres. The last standing remnant of something that was once enormous. Climbers reach its summit on summer days and look out over a landscape of smaller hills rolling away in every direction, and they are standing on the remnant of a mountain that was once among the greatest on earth, though nothing about the view suggests this. The greatness has gone into the ground. It has gone into the soil of Scotland, into the rivers, into the sea floor off the coast, into the sediment of oceans that no longer exist. The Scottish Highlands have a quality of oldness unlike any other landscape in the world. Not the sharp, jagged oldness of young mountains. A rounded, settled oldness. The oldness of something that has been through everything and arrived somewhere that no longer requires drama. Low hills covered in heather and bog, stretching away in every direction under enormous skies. The colour of them in autumn. Brown and gold and deep purple, muted and rich at the same time, shifts with the light in a way that is different from anywhere else. In sunshine, they glow with colours that seem too warm for such a northern place. Under cloud, they deepen to something darker and quieter, and perhaps more true to what they are, which is old, which is worn, which is done with anything that needed to be proved. The clouds move faster here than clouds seem to move anywhere else, driven by the Atlantic wind that crosses the range constantly and has crossed it for as long as the range has existed. The same wind has been shaping these hills for 450 million years. It has carried rain across them and dried them out, and carried more rain, and done this so many times that the hills themselves seem to expect it, seem to have arranged themselves into the exact shapes that best receive what the wind brings. The light changes constantly. A morning that begins in thick grey mist becomes, for 1 hour, startlingly bright, the hills lit from a low angle, so that every curve and hollow is deeply shadowed, and the landscape seems more present, more itself. Then the cloud returns and the brightness passes, and the hills go back to their settled grey-green under a sky that was doing this same thing long before anyone was here to watch it. On a winter night in the Highlands, the cold settles rather than strikes. It arrives at dusk and deepens through the night, and by midnight the frost is on the grass and the loch is still and black and holds the stars without trembling. An owl passes over the heather without a sound. A deer stands at the edge of a dark stand of pine, perfectly still, watching something that requires no response. The lock holds the stars so perfectly that for a moment, looking at it, it is unclear which sky is real and which is reflected. Whether the stars are above or below, whether up is up, whether any of it matters as much as the stillness, which is complete, which has been here since the last ice retreated and left this landscape exactly as it is, settling into its long and patient rest. These mountains are very quiet. Old things often are. The Norwegian fjords. There are places in the world where the mountains and the sea have found a way to exist together so completely that it is difficult to say where one ends and the other begins. Norway is one of those places. Along its western coast, the sea has pushed inland through narrow channels between steep walls of stone. These are the fjords, and they are among the most quietly extraordinary landscapes on this planet. Imagine standing at the edge of one of them in the early morning. The water below is completely still. The fjord is so sheltered between its walls of stone that almost nothing disturbs it. The surface is a mirror, perfect, dark, reflecting the mountains above with such precision that the reflected world looks as real as the original. Two worlds meeting at a surface, the mountains rising above, their shadows descending below, and between them, the water, holding both with equal stillness. There is a particular quality of light in the Norwegian fjords in the hours just after dawn. The sun is still low. It has not yet reached the bottom of the valley, which lies deep in shadow. But it touches the highest peaks, and they glow with a pale gold that seems to come from within the rock itself rather than from any outside source. The lower world is still and grey and cool. The upper world is lit. The contrast is gentle, the kind of difference you feel before you can name it, and the silence. There is a silence in a deep fjord valley that is unlike any other. The walls of stone rise so steeply on either side that ordinary sounds do not carry far. A bird calling somewhere on the water sounds close and then is absorbed into the rock. Wind moves somewhere high above but does not reach the surface. The water makes no sound at all. The fjord is full of still water and old stone and the particular quality of air that has been moving through these valleys since the ice retreated and the sea came in to take its place. The fjords were carved by glaciers, the same ice that formed on the high peaks, moving slowly down the valleys, filling them completely, grinding the rock beneath for thousands of years. The fjords are what the glaciers left when they finally retreated. The sea moving in to fill the space the ice had made, the ocean finding its way into the exact shape the glacier had carved, settling there, becoming still. The walls of a fjord bear the marks of that ice even now. Scratches running parallel to the valley floor, left by boulders frozen into the base of the glacier and dragged for kilometers across the stone. Smooth, curved surfaces where the ice pressed hardest. The rock shaped by something that is long gone, still carrying the memory of that weight in every surface, the way stone always carries what has pressed against it, long after the pressing has passed. The fjords hold their water between walls of Precambrian gneiss and granite, dark and dense and ancient, carrying within their crystal structure the compressed record of pressures and temperatures that make the forces that built the Alps seem gentle by comparison. This stone was already old when the glaciers came. It was already old when the first mountains of this story were still sediment drifting toward a seafloor. It belongs to an earlier chapter entirely, one so deep in the past that even the patient processes we have been following tonight were not yet imagined. The water in the fjords descends far below the surface, cold layers beneath cold layers, each one darker and quieter than the one above, all the way down to a floor that has held its stillness since the glacier carved it free and the sea rushed in to claim it. The deep water of the fjord holds the same quality of dark as the bottom of the ancient ocean where this whole story began. Patient, receiving, holding whatever arrives with the indifference of something very old and very still, entirely unaware of the world above the surface where the pale gold light is just now touching the highest peaks and the mirror water is reflecting two mountains where only one stands. The fjord holds all of it, the light at the top and the dark at the bottom and the still water between, and it has been holding it this way since the last glacier retreated, which was recent in the scale of everything we have been considering tonight, almost recent enough to feel like memory. A small wooden boat is tied to a dock somewhere along the fjord wall. It moves almost imperceptibly on the still water, a slow rising and falling so gentle that it takes a long time to notice, and even then it seems less like movement and more like the fjord itself breathing. The rope that holds the boat is slack. The boat has nowhere to be. The water has nowhere to be. The stone walls on either side have been standing here since before the ice came, and will be standing here long after the sea that fills this valley has itself become part of another chapter in the same long story. The Rockies. The great spine of western North America, running from Canada south to New Mexico. Mountains of a different character from the Alps or the Himalayas. Wider. More open. A spaciousness that is its own kind of extraordinary. Vast sky, long views, the sense that the land extends in every direction with the ease of something that has had a very long time to settle into itself. The Rockies are old enough now that they are declining. The forces that once drove them upward have eased, and the rivers and the frost and the long, slow work of weather are taking them down faster than anything is pushing them up. Over millions of years, they will be lower than they are today. Eventually, given enough time, they will be low rolling hills like the Appalachians of the eastern coast, which were once as high as the Himalayas and are now worn down to gentle forested ridges, their drama dissolved into soil, their peaks rounded into something that asks nothing of the sky. Every mountain has this ending. Given enough time, all mountains become plains, and the material that was mountain becomes sediment. The sediment becomes rock. The rock, given the right arrangement of plates and pressures and time, becomes mountain again. The same material, cycling through different arrangements, different places, different moments in a turning that has no beginning and no end. Only the next form, and the next after that, patient and continuous and indifferent to any single shape along the way. On a summer night in the Rockies, the darkness above the tree line is vast. The trees below, lodgepole pine and Engelmann spruce, their shapes like dark brushstrokes against the slightly less dark sky, stand perfectly still in the cold air that has come down from the snowfields above and is pooling in the meadow, the way cold air always pools in low places, the way everything heavy finds its way to the lowest available ground. Above the trees, the ridge is a black silhouette against the stars, and above the ridge, the stars themselves, more than the eye can hold at once, the familiar constellations almost lost in the density of everything surrounding them. A creek runs somewhere below the meadow. It has been running all day and will run all through the night, carrying meltwater from the snowfields higher up, over stones worn by decades of the same current passing in the same direction, wearing them into the particular smooth paleness of a mountain stream stone. Pale enough to catch whatever light exists and hold it faintly on wet surfaces, visible even in the deepest part of the night. The sound the creek makes is the sound it has always made. Water finding its way over and around and between obstacles in the dark, choosing the lowest path, carrying what it can, releasing what it cannot, moving always toward wherever the ground falls next. Above the creek, above the meadow, above the dark line of the ridge, the stars are turning. The whole sky wheels slowly around the pole star, which hangs fixed above the north while everything else arcs around it through the long hours. The constellations overhead now will have moved by dawn, replaced by others rising in the east, the same slow exchange that the mountains have watched from their position of stillness every night since they rose high enough to watch anything at all. The mountains stand in this dark the way they have always stood in it. The granite that forms their cores cooled deep below the surface over millions of years before anything pushed it upward into the light. The limestone on their flanks formed on the ancient seafloor, one quiet accumulation at a time, before the forces that built these mountains had even begun to gather. The ice that carved their valleys formed in high snowfields where the sun barely reached, compressed year by year into dense blue glacial ice that eventually ground its way downward and left the shapes the creeks and meadows now inhabit. Everything that makes these mountains what they are was made in some form of dark. The folded rock and the slowly cooled granite and the shells pressed into limestone at the very summit. All of it formed in the slow dark of geological time, in places where no light reached and nothing was needed except the patience of the process, which is the only thing that geological time has ever required of anything. And the process continues tonight, as it always continues, in the deep roots of the ranges and the slow drift of the plates and the shells drifting through the dark water of oceans that will not become mountains for longer than this story has been telling itself. The creek runs over its stones. The stars turn above the ridge. The mountains stand in the dark, as they have always stood, as they will go on standing long after the night has passed and the light has returned, and the long turning of everything has carried this particular moment somewhere far behind, into the deep past where all moments eventually settle, quiet and permanent and held. The mountains are here now. They have been building for countless millions of years, and they are finally, recognizably, mountains, high and still and cold at their summits. Deep valleys running between them, where the rivers move fast and clear over smooth stones. Glaciers filling the high hollows, blue in their depths, older than anything alive in the landscape around them. And now, for the very first time in this entire story, something arrives that was not here before. Life. Not the life of the ancient ocean, not the plankton and the creatures whose shells built the limestone that now forms these peaks. This is something new, a form of life that moves across rock rather than drifting through water, that clings to stone and finds a way to survive in conditions that seem designed to prevent survival. It begins so quietly you might miss it entirely. A thin grey crust on the surface of a rock. That is all. A lichen. It does not look like much, does not move, and makes no sound of any kind. Nothing about it suggests that anything is happening. It simply adheres to the surface of the stone and begins, very slowly, to do what it does. A lichen is not a solitary organism. It is a partnership, living together so completely that they have become something neither could be alone. A fungus and an alga, each bringing something the other lacks. The fungus provides structure and holds moisture. The alga produces food through photosynthesis. Together, they can survive on bare rock in conditions of cold and dryness and exposure that would kill almost anything else. They ask almost nothing of the world. A little light, a little moisture, a surface to hold. And in return, they leave behind something the rock has never had before. When they die, a trace of organic material remains. A film so thin it is almost invisible. The very first soil. The beginning of the possibility of everything that will come after. On the rock face where the first lichen settles, a thin veil of mist is moving in from the west. It does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers, sheet after sheet, each one slightly thicker than the last, until the rock is wrapped in a white that muffles every edge and softens every surface. The lichen disappears into it. The rock disappears into it. For a while, there is only white in every direction and the faint sound of moisture settling on stone. Then the mist thins. A pale shape of sunlight appears behind it, and slowly the rock re-emerges. Darker now where the moisture has touched it, the lichen a little brighter against the wet stone, as if the mist left something behind for it. By night, the mist will have cleared entirely, and the rock will hold the last of the day's warmth for a while before the cold settles into it completely, the way cold settles into stone everywhere, slowly and from the inside out, before the mosses arrive, before the plants, before any creature finds its way to these high bare slopes. There is a period when the mountain is simply rock, nothing else, and the mountain in that state has a quality that is worth pausing over for a moment. Imagine standing on a high ridge above the tree line, above the snow line. Each breath here feels slightly different from a breath at sea level, Not strained, just more present, more noticeable. You are aware of the air in a way you are not in the valley below. The rock beneath your feet is bare, cold to the touch even in summer. The kind of cold that comes from depth rather than from temperature. The stone holds the cold of the interior and gives it slowly outward toward the surface. There is almost no sound here. Wind moves across the high ridges, but not constantly. Between the gusts, the air is completely still. And this is not the muffled silence of a closed room, but the open silence of a high place, where there is nothing to absorb sound, and the absence of it is therefore more present than it would be anywhere else. A solitary raindrop lands on bare stone. The small, sharp sound of water meeting rock, followed immediately by nothing. The drop spreads across the surface and begins to move, finding the lowest path, the way all water moves. It disappears into a crack between the stones and the surface is bare again. The air at this altitude carries a smell that is difficult to describe to someone who has not been there. Not the absence of smell, but the presence of something so clean and stripped of complexity that it registers as barely there at all. No vegetation, no soil, no water nearby. Just rock and sky and whatever the wind carries, which at this height is almost nothing. Cold and thin and utterly simple. The mountain before life arrived is perhaps the closest thing on the surface of the earth to what the world was like before complexity existed. Long before anything had learned to hold on, long before anything had found a way to remain here, only rock. The arrangement of stone into forms that have been building for a very long time and will continue long after anything alive has departed. The high bare ridge at the hour before dawn has no color. Everything is grey. The rock is grey. The sky above it is the pale grey of something that has not yet decided to become blue. The snow in the hollows is a darker grey than the sky. The shadows on the rock faces are the deepest grey of all. And in the middle of all that grey, the absolute stillness. The mountain does not need anything to be different. Dawn will come when it comes. Spring will come when it comes, in its own season, the way it always has. The lichens will arrive eventually, and the mosses after them, and the creatures that follow the mosses. Each one finding its way here in its own time, none of it changing what the mountain is in this moment. Right now, it is simply here, exactly as it is. Complete in itself, the way stone has always been complete in itself, long before there was anything to notice otherwise. Mosses come after the lichens. They find the thin film of organic material the lichens have left and establish themselves there in the sheltered spaces between rocks, in the cracks where a little soil has gathered. They grow in low cushions and soft mats, holding moisture, deepening the soil, making the surface of the mountain a little more capable of holding life. The soil thickens across centuries, so gradually that no passing year shows any change. What begins as a film becomes, over a very long time, something a root can find purchase in, something that holds water through a dry week, something that traps a seed and keeps it long enough to germinate. The same slow building the seafloor performed, now happening on a different surface, under an open sky. And then the plants arrive. Alpine plants are among the most quietly remarkable things on Earth. They grow low to avoid the wind. Their leaves are small and often covered in fine hairs that trap a thin layer of still air next to the surface, insulating against cold, reducing moisture loss. Their roots go deep into every crack they can find, anchoring against storms, reaching for water in places where water is scarce. They bloom in summer with an intensity that belongs entirely to the brevity of the season. The growing window at high altitude is narrow, the window between the last frost of spring and the first frost of autumn, and everything must happen within it. The flowers that appear on these plants are extraordinarily vivid. Blues so deep they seem lit from within, yellows so pure they glow against grey rock, purples so rich they look almost painted. On a clear afternoon in midsummer, above the tree line, a high meadow holds an impossible density of colour. Gentians, the blue of deep water. Globe flowers, the yellow of new butter. harebells moving in a wind so light it cannot be felt on the skin but is just strong enough to set the smallest flowers trembling. The air above the meadow smells of warm rock and something faintly sweet. Pollen from flowers that only exist here, at this altitude, in this brief window of warmth. By late afternoon, the shadows of the peaks above have begun to cross the meadow, moving east as the sun drops. Where the shadow falls, the air cools immediately. The flowers close, one by one, as the temperature falls. The bees that were working through the gentians retreat somewhere lower. By evening, the meadow holds only the wind and the color of the closed flowers and the stars beginning to appear above the highest ridge. First a lone star, then a cluster, then the whole cold sky opening above the peaks. The frost will come tonight. The flowers will survive it. They have survived countless frosts before this one, and they will survive countless more. Each one the same closing, each one followed by the same slow opening when the morning warms the stone again. Animals follow the plants. First the insects, beetles moving across the rock surface with a purposefulness that seems improbable at this altitude. Butterflies appearing briefly on the warmest days when the sun heats the dark rock enough to warm the air immediately above it. Bees climbing higher than almost any other creature to find the flowers that bloom in places nothing else can reach. Then the small mammals. The pika lives in the rock piles of high mountain slopes across Asia and North America. A small round creature related to the rabbit, but without the long ears and without the long back legs. It does not hibernate. All through the brief summer it gathers, carrying dried grasses and flowers and leaves in small bundles back to caches beneath the rocks, building hay piles that will carry it through the long winter ahead. A picker on a summer afternoon is entirely absorbed in its work, steady and completely engaged, moving back and forth across the boulders, gathering and carrying, building the quiet provision that will make the cold months possible. Each trip a small loop from the meadow edge to the rock pile and back, the same path worn slightly smoother with each passing season, the hay pile growing by small increments that are invisible in any single day but become, by autumn, something substantial enough to last until spring. The marmot lives nearby, a larger animal, golden brown and round from the summer meadows. The marmot hibernates. Through the long, dark months until the return of spring, it is underground in a burrow lined with dry grass, its heart beating incredibly slowly, its body temperature dropped close to the temperature of the surrounding soil. Alive, technically, but having surrendered almost completely to the season. The burrow is deep enough that the worst of the winter cold does not reach it. The grass lining holds what warmth the body produces. Above, the mountain does what mountains do through winter, holds the snow, releases it slowly into the streams below, waits. In spring, the marmot emerges, blinking in the new light, thin from the long fast, and begins again. Picture the morning it comes out. The snow still deep in the shadow of the rocks, but retreating in the sun-facing hollows, the bare ground there already showing the first green where the soil has warmed. The marmot sits upright at the entrance to its burrow, nose working, eyes adjusting. The air is cold enough to show its breath. The sky above the valley is enormous and pale and cloudless. A hawk turns in a long circle above the far ridge, riding the first thermal of the morning. The marmot watches it. The hawk rises and becomes a speck and disappears behind the ridge. The marmot looks at the meadow. The meadow is there, exactly as it was the season before. The grass just beginning. The gentian leaves already small and dark green against the soil. The first bee of the season moving low across the ground, searching. The marmot steps out of the burrow completely. The mountain receives it back. Higher still, where almost nothing survives, certain creatures move with a confidence that seems impossible given the conditions. The snow leopard, rarely seen. Its pale grey coat patterned with dark rosettes blends so completely with the rock and snow of its high mountain home that it can be invisible even to people who know exactly what they are looking for. It moves across terrain that would require ropes and technical equipment for a human, stepping from ledge to ledge on wide paws that spread on impact, gripping rock with soft pads and hard claws made precisely for this surface. Its tail is nearly as long as its body. It uses it for balance on steep ground. And when it sleeps, in some high, cold hollow of rock above the clouds, it wraps that tail around its face, a soft, warm barrier against the cold. The snow leopard sleeping somewhere above the last tree line, above the last trace of soil, wrapped in its own tail, breathing slowly in the cold mountain air. The rock around it, the same grey as its coat. Below it, the valley drops away into blue haze. The river a thin silver line far below. The villages smaller than anything the eye can easily hold. Nothing disturbs it. The wind moves across the ridge above without touching the hollow where it rests. The cold deepens as the afternoon light tilts toward the west and the shadows lengthen across the snow. A lammergeier, a great bearded vulture, circles once on the updraft above the cliff face and drops out of sight below the ridge. The snow leopard does not stir. It is completely at rest in the middle of everything wild and cold and exposed. No shelter except the slight hollow in the rock. No warmth except what it carries inside itself and holds with its tail wrapped close. That is enough. Human beings have lived at altitude for countless generations. Not visiting, not passing through. Living. The Sherpa of Nepal. The people of the Tibetan Plateau. The communities of the high Andes who have built their lives on the highest habitable ridges of the world for more generations than memory can hold. Their bodies are different from the bodies of people who live at sea level. Inside, in the blood and the lungs and the heart, there are adaptations that took untold generations to quietly unfold. Larger lung capacity, blood that carries oxygen more efficiently, hearts that have learned a different rhythm for a different air. The mountain reached inside them, across deep time, and changed what they are from within. Their cultures reflect the mountains they inhabit. Their calendars are tied to mountain weather. Their trade routes run through mountain passes. Their stories are full of high places and cold winds and the quality of light that exists above the clouds. Their gods live on the summits. What those people know, living inside the mountain rather than visiting it, is difficult to describe to someone who has only ever seen mountains from a distance. A mountain is a presence, not something that notices you or responds to you. Something that is simply, undeniably there. Something so large and so old that being near it changes the pace at which time seems to move. Near a great mountain, time moves differently. Time here has a different weight to it, more present, more itself, gathered close around whoever stands inside it. On a cold evening in a high village, the peaks above catch the last of the light, while the valley below is already dark. The cooking fires are lit. The smell of wood smoke drifts across the steep lanes between stone houses. Someone is moving between buildings with a lamp, the small warm circle of it cutting through the blue dusk. Above the roof lines, the snow on the summit still glows, faintly orange, then rose, then the palest possible pink before it finally releases the light and becomes simply white against a darkening sky. The village settles into the night, doors close, voices quiet. The stars appear above the peaks, first a lone star, then in clusters, then all at once in the way high-altitude skies reveal them, not gradually but in a rush, as though the sky could no longer hold them back, and the mountain stands above all of it, in the dark, as it always has, as it will long after the village and everything in it has passed into the soil. Step back from the detail now. Step back and let the whole story find its shape. Sediment falling through dark water for untold eons. Plates moving at the speed of growing fingernails. The moment something changed direction and began to rise. Rock moving through heat and pressure and emerging as something entirely different. An island breaking the surface of the sea. Rivers carving valleys. Glaciers sculpting the shapes that make mountains recognizable from anywhere on Earth. And now, the mountains that have been growing through all of this are beginning, in their own time, to return. Because all mountains return. Every mountain on Earth is being eroded right now, Rivers carry pieces of every range in the world toward the sea. Glaciers grind rock into powder and deliver it to rivers. Rain dissolves limestone. Frost cracks rock faces and sends boulders to the scree slopes below. The mountains are always coming down, even as some of them are still going up. All that material travels down rivers. It spreads across floodplains. It reaches the sea and settles on the ocean floor. Layer by layer, in the darkness and the cold, it accumulates, becoming sediment, becoming, over millions of years, rock. And the ocean floor, given the right arrangement of plates, may one day be pushed upward again, into mountains. The limestone that forms the summit of Everest was once the floor of the ancient Tethys Ocean. The floor of that sea was once the shells of creatures too small to see. The shells were once minerals dissolved in seawater. The minerals were once the rock of an earlier mountain, eroded and carried to an earlier sea. And what the high peaks are shedding now, into the rivers below, into the gorges that cut through the foothills, will one day be rock again. In some configuration of continents that no one alive can predict, it may rise again into mountains that no one alive will ever see. The cycle has no beginning and no end. Mountain and plain, rising and wearing away. Always the same material, always a different form. The calcium in your bones was once an ocean floor. The iron in your blood was forged in a star that died before the earth existed. The water in your cells has been glacier and river and rain and cloud more times than memory can hold. You are not separate from this story. You are made of it. The plates are still moving tonight. Right now, as you lie here, the great land masses are pressing forward beneath the surface. In the far north, height is slowly being added to a summit that already stands at the very roof of the world, far above the sea it was once the floor of. In the deep west, magma is rising silently toward the surface, adding new layers of volcanic rock to peaks that have been building across countless ages. And across the wide valleys, the earth is pulling itself apart, the ground rising patiently as the centers drop. The earth is working tonight. Volcanoes releasing heat that has been building since before the earliest living thing existed. Rivers carrying what was once mountain toward what will one day be seafloor. The deep mantle circulating its vast, slow rivers of heat, the same circulation that has been turning since the planet cooled enough to have a surface at all. All of it continuous, all of it patient, all of it moving at its own pace through the dark, the same way it moved through every dark that came before this one, and will move through every dark that follows. Outside, if you imagine it, the night sky above the nearest high ground is very clear. The kind of clear that comes after rain moves through and leaves the air washed clean behind it. A thin crescent moon is low in the west, just above the horizon, its light too faint to dim the stars, but bright enough to silver the uppermost snow on the nearest ridge. The shadow side of the moon is visible too. Earthshine, the reflected light of the sunlit earth bouncing back to illuminate what the sun is not reaching. Dual illumination on the silent crescent. The ridge below it runs east to west, a long, dark shape against the stars. On its southern face, where the snow melts earlier, a thin waterfall catches the moonlight and drops it in a pale thread from a shelf of rock into the dark of the valley below. The sound of it would be faint from this distance, lost in the ambient quiet of the night. The waterfall exists in silence, from here, though it is making sound. The valley holds its cold. Air drains downhill at night, the way water drains, and the valley floor is always the coldest place by morning. Frost will form on the grass down there before it forms anywhere else. By the time the sun clears the eastern ridge, the frost will have turned the meadow white, and for an hour the valley will look like winter, and then the sun will touch it, and the white will disappear, and the valley will return to itself, green and ordinary, as though nothing had happened. But the frost was there. The cold was real. The night did its work. The mountains are still here now, as you breathe. Somewhere a high pass is holding a metre of fresh snow that fell yesterday. The surface of it is unbroken, except for the tracks of a single fox that crossed in the night. the prints precise and evenly spaced, leading from a dark outcrop on the east side of the pass to a dark outcrop on the west, as if the fox knew exactly where it was going and stopped for nothing. By noon, the wind will have moved the surface snow and covered those tracks. By next week, the new snow will have compressed into the old snow below it. By next century, it may be ice. But right now, the tracks are there, crisp and clear and already filling with blue shadow as the moon moves and the angle of the light shifts. A record of one small creature crossing one high place on one cold night on a planet that will go on reshaping itself long after both the record and the creature that made it are gone. The night is doing what nights do. Moving, cooling, deepening. The stars are turning above the ridge at the same steady rate they have always turned, a rotation so close to a full day and so reliable that every navigation system humans have ever built was calibrated against it. The body knows about turning, about the rhythm of light and dark, about the particular quality of 3 in the morning when the body is furthest from waking and closest to the deep. That deep is close now. It is right here. Somewhere in the world right now, a shell the size of a dust grain is beginning its fall through dark water toward an ocean floor it has never touched. It left the surface a moment ago, moving through the bright zone, where the light is still warm and green, in a few minutes through the blue zone, where the light is cooler and fainter, then into the dimming blue, then into the near dark, then into the absolute dark of the deep ocean floor, where the temperature has stayed the same for longer than anything alive can remember. The shell is not hurrying. It has nowhere to be except where it is going, and it will get there when it gets there. That drift, through brightness into blue, into dark, into stillness, is the same direction sleep moves, the bright zone of the day that is ending, the blue where things grow quieter, the dimming, the near dark, and then the deep, where the temperature is steady and everything is held without effort, and the shells have been arriving for longer than this story can hold, one by one, each one adding its almost nothing to the accumulation of everything. The mountain does not measure its height against other mountains. It does not wonder whether it is becoming what it should be. It responds to the forces that act on it, the pressure from below, the erosion from above, the movement of the plates, the fall of water and ice. It receives all of it, and it becomes, over time, exactly what those forces make it. And what those forces make it is extraordinary. Not because the mountain tried to be extraordinary, because it was there, and the forces were there, and the time was there. Somewhere on a high ridge tonight, a single boulder that has sat in the same place since the glacier retreated is catching the last grey light before full dark. It does not know it is being looked at in this imagined moment by anyone. It has not moved in longer than any living memory could trace. It will not move tonight either. It simply holds its place on the slope, the way it has held its place through every night since the ice released it, gathering frost, losing frost, gathering it again. The thoughts that are still turning can slow the way a river slows when it reaches the flatlands, spreading wide, losing its banks, growing still, depositing what it has been carrying for miles. That slowing is already happening. Follow it down. There is one more thing worth knowing as you drift. The mountains you might have looked at today, if you looked at any, are not what they were 1,000,000 years ago. They will not be what they are 1,000,000 years from now. They are moving in the way that all things that seem permanent are moving, beneath the threshold of any human observation in the register of geological time. A mountain is a process wearing the shape of an object. It looks permanent because the scale of its change is so far beyond the scale of a human life that the change becomes invisible. But a mountain is no more fixed than a wave. It is a wave moving so gradually that it appears to stand still. The wave that built these mountains began in the collision of two plates. It is still moving, still shaping. The energy of that original meeting is still working its way through rock, still producing the shapes that catch snow and split clouds and cast shadows across whole valleys at dawn. When that energy is finally spent, after a stretch of time too long to hold in the mind, the mountains will be lower. The plains will be wider. The sediment will be settling on the floor of some ocean, where it will begin again. Everything begins again. The same material, the same forces, the same slow building of something extraordinary from almost nothing on a planet that has been doing this since before there was anyone to notice, and will keep doing it long after every light in every window on Earth has gone dark for the night. Right now, those atoms are here, arranged in the particular shape of you, lying still, breathing the air of a planet that has been breathing its own kind of breath. Mountain and plain, rising and falling, for longer than any of this story can properly express. That is enough, more than enough. And all of this is happening right now, the way frost always forms. One molecule of water vapor touching one cold surface and becoming solid. Then another, then another. No one is watching. The ridge has been doing this every night for as long as there have been nights cold enough for it. By morning, the rock will be covered in a thin white film, each crystal a small, perfect structure formed in the dark by water and cold and nothing else. When the sun touches the ridge, the frost will melt and the water will run into the cracks. The surface will be as it was before. The rock notices nothing of this, but the crack is a fraction wider than it was. In the high mountains of Asia, a glacier is moving. The ice at its base is being pressed forward by the weight of all the ice above it. The rock beneath is being scraped. Fine powder is being added to the meltwater running beneath the ice in channels too cold and dark for any living thing to know. The valley is being widened by fractions tonight, as it has been widened every night for longer than anyone has kept count. On the floor of a warm ocean far to the south, sediment is falling. The rivers that drain the great mountain ranges carry enormous quantities of material. Sand and silt and dissolved minerals, all picked up from the rock of the mountains and carried down to the sea. At the river mouths, the water slows and lets go of what it was carrying. And on the ocean floor, in the deep dark, the layers are building, each one settling into place beside the one before it, a few molecules at a time, in a silence that has never once been interrupted. In the Scottish Highlands, a boulder that has been balanced on a hillside since the glacier that left it there finally retreated is very slightly less stable than it was this morning. A night of cold and the quiet expansion of water in a crack beneath it has shifted something by an amount too small to feel. It may stand for a long time yet, or it may go tomorrow. The hillside does not keep that kind of time. In the fjords of Norway, the water lies dark and motionless between the walls of stone. The mountains lean into their own reflections the way they have every still night since the ice first carved these valleys, and the water holds the shape of them, upside down, two ranges meeting at a single flat line where the rock gives way to its own mirror image. And somewhere, right now, a shell the size of a dust grain is beginning its long fall through dark water toward a floor it has never touched. It left the surface a moment ago. It is drifting downward through the bright zone, then through the fading blue, then into the complete and absolute dark below. It is not hurrying. It has nowhere to be except where it is going. Another shell follows it, then another. On the floor of that ancient sea, the layers are still building, the same way they have always built, the same patience, the same slow arrival of almost nothing, accumulating into something that will one day, given enough time and the right movement of the great plates below, become a mountain. The frost forms on the ridge. The glacier scrapes its valley a fraction wider. The sediment falls through dark water and settles into its place. The crack in the boulder widens by something too small to measure, and somewhere deep in the earth, in the hot, slow dark below the crust, rock that has been moving for longer than this story can measure continues moving, patient and indifferent and entirely without hurry. The world builds itself in the dark. It always has. The snow leopard is still up there, somewhere above the clouds, tail wrapped around its face. Just the hollow in the rock, the cold air settling over the ridge, and the slow, steady breathing of an animal that has stopped needing anything else from the night. The marmot is in its burrow deep below the frost line, its heartbeat so faint it would take careful equipment to detect. The Pika is somewhere in the rocks, still and small, its hay pile built, its winter prepared for, nothing left to do but wait inside the warmth of its own small body. The mountain holds all of them, the snow leopard and the marmot and the pika and the lichen on the cold face of the rock and the glacier in the high cirque and the waterfall catching moonlight in the valley and the fox tracks filling with blue shadow in the fresh snow of the pass. The shells are still falling in the ancient ocean, one by one, in the soft absolute dark of the deep water, each one adding its almost nothing to the floor below. The mountain is still rising, by an amount too small to ever notice, from the collision that began before this story could properly measure. The fox tracks are filling with shadow on the high pass. The crescent moon is touching the westernmost ridge and beginning to set. And in the deep roots of everything, in the cooling granite and the folded limestone and the marble that was once a creature's shell in a warm and vanished sea, the same work continues, quietly, in the dark, the way it always has. Good night. Sleep well.